Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Record Basics, Record Collecting 101, whatever you want to call it. In this episode, we're going to talk about some things which are really popular today, and that is colored vinyl and record weight. Again, when we're collecting vinyl, as with so many things, it's personal preference. You should buy what you like. Do you like color? Do you like black? Do you have problems with this? Do you have problems with that? It's all up to you. It's not what anybody else tells you. Me personally, I used to stay as far away from colored vinyl and picture disc as I could. Maybe I would pick up a piece here or there solely for collectible purposes, not for listening purposes. However, there is a freak here in town who got me into colored vinyl, and I have to say, nowadays, I'm not so afraid of it. But things have changed. The technology has changed. The dyes have changed. Just everything has changed. And so now I have to say, when I compare some colored vinyl to black vinyl, there is some stuff that I actually like. And I have to admit, from an aesthetic point of view, it can be really nice to have a nice looking album cover. And when you slide the record out, it looks nice too. But let's get into a little bit about this and just talk a little bit about colored vinyl versus black vinyl and record weight and what difference it all makes. I should say, though, back in the 70s and 80s, like I just alluded to, the technology today for doing colored vinyl is a lot better than it used to be. However, some of the older stuff was collectible because usually when they would print vinyl way back in the days, they would only do a small run. And so if it was printed on color, chances were there wasn't that many printed of that. It could have been a few thousand or 8,000, who knows? And so in that sense, it was a little more collectible. And even today, whether or not you like it, usually when colored vinyl is printed, it is printed in a smaller run. And so just by the sheer numbers available, it usually is a more limited pressing. So if you're a total vinyl nerd who's out to just collect for the sake of having something rare, maybe you lean towards that. It is interesting to note, though, back in the good old days of record collecting and buying in the 70s and 80s, it seems like Holland and Belgium and somewhat in Germany, they were really big into pressing on colored vinyl, especially 7 inches and stuff. So that was pretty natural to them, whereas in the UK and the US, it was a little more rare. But let's get into colored vinyl. What is colored vinyl? Do you know? Is this colored vinyl? Or is this colored vinyl? Let's talk about that, shall we? Pure vinyl. A lot of people say for the best sound, you want pure vinyl with no coloring or additives whatsoever. Pure vinyl is actually PVC. And you know, pure vinyl is not this. This is actually colored vinyl. Pure vinyl is milky white. It's not crystal clear. This is actually pure PVC, pure vinyl right here. No additives, no colorants, straight up. This is about as clean as a sound you can get. So, in theory, everybody who buys this, if you say you don't like colored vinyl and you like to buy black vinyl, in reality, you're buying colored vinyl because this has color and additives added to it. Let's talk about that. What makes this milky white record black? Well, obviously, it would be carbon. Carbon black makes black. And we'll get into that in a second. To make other colors, you mix PVC, this milky white, with titanium oxide, and then whatever colorant you want to use. So, first and foremost, the most popular colored album, which is actually the most standard album, is your typical black LP. Let's talk about that, its coloring and what it does and why it's not pure vinyl. The thing that helps the black LP is it's actually colored with carbon pigment, and that's what makes it black. However, it doesn't just color it. Carbon has some benefits. The carbon, when it's pressed into the vinyl or mixed with the vinyl, we should say, it actually helps to buffer the sound and absorb unwanted noise and hiss. And carbon actually helps distribute the electrical static charge. So you do get a very nice, clean, even sound. Also, the carbon added to this PVC, which makes it black, it has another benefit. It makes the PVC or the vinyl stronger than uncolored and natural vinyl. So that's good. It gives you a little more strength and a little bit better sound. And that's because with the other colors and the mixtures, there's different chemical compounds added. And so it just kind of takes away a little bit of the strength. So overall, most common LP, carbon black helps color it black, helps distribute the static charge, and actually helps absorb unwanted noise and hiss. Overall, very good choice, your standard black colored album. Now, let's talk about these. White and clear. Every color, believe it or not, has different benefits, different possible problems, different strengths, and just a different, well, aesthetic beauty, if you will. However, everything that's colored is susceptible to something that black isn't. However, any color, white, clear, pink, blue, it doesn't matter. Anything else colored other than black is all susceptible to a bigger or a more noticeable noise floor. What the heck is a noise floor? All colored vinyl is susceptible to something that black vinyl is not so much susceptible to, and that is a noise floor. You have a greater noise floor when you have colored vinyl like this. What is noise floor? It's a technical, nerdy term. Basically, it just means your record is more susceptible, or it could be a little more noisier than the other pressings of like the natural vinyl, because it doesn't have other chemical compounds that may interact with each other or not interact good with each other, or the pigment that they use, or the pellets that they use to color the record. So you can get a little more static. It may not be as clear. You may not have as high as highs. There's several different things that could create your noise floor, and that's just a possibility you have in any colored vinyl other than black or natural. Now, one weird thing about that, let's talk about this real quick. White. What is one of the downfalls of white? Aside from, I think white looks great, especially depending on the cover you have. But one of the real problems that people complain about with white, and even the pressing plants have a problem with, is that it's really hard, if you get in there and look, it's really hard to see the grooves. So it's difficult for quality control when you have a white record to check and see how it's pressing and if everything is okay. And not to mention, if you're at home or you're trying to DJ with one of these babies, trying to put the needle in between these tracks can be very hard on white. But it looks good, doesn't it? With clear, there's a whole other problem. You can see the grooves a lot better, but it can be, believe it or not, slightly more noisy. Not because of additives, but the exact opposite, because there wasn't many additives put in here. So it's just kind of like how you press it with this baby. Yay, that's how it's going to be. It could be a noisy batch. It could be a good batch of vinyl, but some of the additives do help, some take away, but sometimes clear can be a little more noisier. Now, there are those who argue one of the cleanest, best pressings you can get are clear vinyl? I don't know. I haven't been able to tell the difference myself. I like the clear. I do like the clear, but is it a more cleaner sound? Is it a more staticky sound? Again, you tell me what your experience is with clear. Related to these two babies, white and clear, which seems to be trendy these days, is glow in the dark vinyl. By all means, stay away. Aside from picture disc, glow in the dark pieces of vinyl or pressings of vinyl, horrible. Probably the worst sounding. It's a toss up between that and a picture disc of what's going to sound more crap. So, friendly word of advice, if you collect colored vinyl or you're interested in different pieces, if it's glow in the dark, stay away. How did colored vinyl come about? And by colored, I mean the actual colored vinyl. Actually, it's interesting. Aside from some of the pros and cons, which we'll talk about a few more here in a second, it came about in the early 50s. RCA had a notion when they invented the single that if they color coded the records with certain type of vinyl, it would be easier for the collector or the person buying vinyl to distinguish immediately just looking at a record, like, oh, this is jazz or this is whatever and whatever. There was actually three basic colors in the 50s when this all started to help distinguish what records were which. Children's records were yellow, popular music and classical and instrumental music was blue, and country music was green. And funnily enough, I happen to have an early pressing of one of those here on this RCA. Country single is green. Why were there only three colors? Where's rock and roll? Good question. It's 1952. Rock and roll didn't exist back then, so they didn't designate a color to rock and roll. Just a little bit of trivial fact there. Like I said earlier, the quality of vinyl, colored vinyl today is way better than it was back in the old days. And some of that is obviously technology, but also they say it's by the pellets that are purchased and who they purchase them from can help with the sound of your vinyl, your colored vinyl record, and give you a much better sound experience today than back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And you know, another thing is, even today, that you have to be aware of is sometimes when you mix different compounds and chemicals with the PVC, it can strengthen, it can make it look good, maybe even help with the sound, but sometimes certain chemicals and pigments don't bind well, and it can weaken the record. It can go the total opposite direction. And it can also maybe make your record a little more prone to warping. As I said a few minutes ago, some bits, some colors are better than others. Glow in the dark, another current trend that's really bad, splatter vinyl. When you get these vinyl, this record that has, you know, like a sunburst or whatever, you want to stay away from those. Some people are crazy about them, but nerd wise and true for your ear wise, they're probably one of the worst. Aside from, I think the ultimate worst, like I mentioned earlier, picture disc. Totally bad. Totally bad. It's because it's composed of three layers. You have your base layer, then you have your image, and then you have a real thin top layer. And because it's the three layers, the top layer is pressed very thin with very thin grooves. So you just don't get the sound reproduction that you do in a standard pressing vinyl record that you do with a picture disc. In fact, because the top layer is so thin and the grooves are so small, they actually decay faster than your standard black vinyl LP. Aside from color, what about weight? That too can be a personal preference, but does it matter? Yeah, kinda, sorta, and technically it matters a lot. The average weight of an album today is about 120 grams. That's about 4 ounces. Your audiophile and heavyweight pressings can be standard is about 180, but it can go up to 200, even 240 grams, which is 2 ounces more. So that's about 6 ounces versus 4 ounce. For the 7-inch, average weight is about 1.4 ounces, and that's about 40 grams. The weight of records has actually changed over time. And it's really interesting because in the olden days, records were actually heavier, especially with jazz releases. The average in 1956 on Blue Note, the average weight for a record was 220 grams. That's considered like heavy duty audiophile pressing today. Capitol records in the 60s, like your average Beatles record, original release in the 60s, was about 120 grams. That's about the same weight of a record today. CBS was pressing records back in that time. They were pressing about 120. But records got thinner during the 70s. And you may remember that, especially with the Bowie, the Dynaflex records, because they were super bendy and they bragged that it was an unbreakable LP. You could still break them, but man, you could bend those things like nobody's business. Why was that? Actually, it's because of the Arabs, because of the oil shortage. When there was the whole petroleum shortage going on, vinyl comes from oil. So, or shall I say, from petroleum products. It is a petroleum byproduct, but it comes basically from oil. And when oil was hard to get, it made things difficult in the record world. Now, there is a rumor RCA was skimping on other artists, and actually, because Bowie was really taken off at that time, was giving Bowie's records precedence over the other artists on their roster. So he actually has some better sounding vinyl, even if it is on Dynaflex, than maybe Lou Reed did or whoever else was on RCA at the time. Is that true? I don't know, but it makes for a good story. By the way, those Dynaflex records, they only weighed 3.4 ounces or about 98 grams. 180 grams. Let's talk about that. That today is your standard heavyweight record, deluxe edition pressed on 180 grams. What does it mean and does it matter? Well, in the old days, like I mentioned a few seconds ago, that was standard issue, dude. You got a heavy disc anyway. But because things changed and discs got kind of skinny, now they're back to the actual standard size pressings that they want to call audiophile. Does it matter? Yeah, it can. It does help with sound, period. Now, how much? Again, we can argue that. You may have your own opinions, let me know. But it does affect the sound. One true benefit, even if you can't hear it, the 180 gram LP, it's heavier. It means it's a little bit stronger, but it also means because it is heavier and more dense, you have less chance for warping. That's a good thing. Now, what about the sound? Does it matter? Technically, they say it does. Why? Because a heavier disc actually makes, because it is heavier and a little bit thicker, your vinyl is more apt to come out flat, which means you have a better stable recording surface, you have a better stable playing surface. When you have a better stable playing surface, you have a cleaner surface, which means you have better sound reproduction. And there's less surface noise when your needle is tracking through those grooves. Real nerds would say that is your signal to noise ratio, which is better, so you're getting better sound on a heavier pressing. Another benefit is if you have a cleaner, better pressing and your needle isn't getting all that static and gunk going through the grooves, technically you're going to get longer life out of your record. And when it's a heavier pressing and sturdier, it's going to last longer just by its sheer weight and mass, body mass. Some people say a heavier pressing has deeper grooves. That's like an urban myth. Yes, 180 grams is thicker. It may raise your tone arm a bit and it may cause your tracking to be slightly different, which could improve sound. But grooves are not thicker. If that was true, by making a thicker record and you cut deeper grooves, basically you would just be creating this giant audiophile waffle. So we know that's not true. You're not going to make a thicker record and then cut deeper in. Another point is needles are only so deep. How's your needle going to get way in there if your groove is deeper? Think about it. Doesn't make sense, does it? And it's actually groove depth, if you want to get into it, it's kind of standard, no matter how thick the vinyl. According to pressing plants and engineers, you only press to about 70 microns. I don't know how little that is, but if it's a micron, it is little. The basic thing about 180 grams when they say it's an audiophile pressing, yes, the weight's going to help. Hopefully they did a good pressing job. But at the end of the day, the thing that's really going to matter aside from the weight, and it seems trivial, I mentioned it a few minutes ago, no matter what color, no matter the record, it all boils down to the vinyl. It depends on the pressing plant, where they buy their pellets from, where they get their dyes from, all those things matter. But at the end of the day, it's the basic product, which are your vinyl pellets. You get good, clean, unrecycled pellets, you're going to have a much better sounding record, a true audiophile edition. It will be if you have that, as opposed to some recycled, pellets that are being used. Which, by the way, think about this. Coldplay, for example, I forgot who else it was, just put a record out on this earth vinyl or something like that, where they're advertising it is recycled vinyl. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these new pressings that are coming out on these represses, how they sound, how people like them. Do they hold up or are they crap? So let's check back on that. I actually have one of those Coldplay here in the store, but we'll see how that works out. Another thing, if you really want good sound and you have a heavy disc or you have a regular disc, some audiophiles say if you put one of those mats on top of your turntable, it will increase your bass response, especially on heavier discs. But they also say it may increase your bass response and you get a little more better sound separation and so forth by using one of those mats, which just, again, help with the playing surface, the resonance, and all that kind of stuff. Is it true? I don't know. Try it. You let me know. One thing, though, about 180 gram, if you read a lot of reviews, it is a popular size these days. If you read a lot of reviews, personally, I just think a lot of guys want to be nitpicky and super nerdy about it. It's good to be a nerd, but not too nerdy. You hear a lot saying, oh, mine came warped. There was a slight warp. This can be a problem. Why is that? Because you have heavier vinyl being pressed, okay? That difference does make a difference. That weight difference does make a difference. I'm not into physics, but the way it was explained to me, when you have that heavier, that press coming down, pressing that thicker piece of vinyl, when that press raises up, immediately that surface area starts to change temperature at a much faster rate than the middle of the disc or the bottom of the disc because it's thicker, remember? So therefore, your surface and your edges may cool a lot faster or quicker than your core on those heavier pieces of vinyl, which may make the edge slightly warp or the lip warp or however. This is a problem sometimes. It is susceptible to that. How often does it happen? I don't know, but it does happen. That is one of the downsides from a heavier pressing today. Another thing, if you want to talk about other problems 180 can have, is that because it's heavier, it busts through the inner sleeves a lot easier. They increase the vinyl size, but they don't always increase the strength of your jacket or your sleeve. So you may have some problems and bust throughs coming through and on your spine where the 180 gram will push through and crack your spine and open it up. And of course, the other thing, not that any of you people are that wimpy, but they are heavier. So if you are carrying more than a few, it's noticeably heavier than carrying a regular record around. Not a big deal though, is it? So there we have it. We talked a little bit about record weight and color. What does it matter? A lot and not much. It's just really up to you what you like and what you don't like. But let me show you this. Got this recently in the shop. Fantastic. If you don't have this 12-inch, check it out. It is a great version. It's a really cool version of the song. But beautiful pressing. Came out in 2 colors, pink and red. I happen to get this beautiful pink copy in. Isn't that great looking? See, that's what I mentioned earlier. You can have a great cover with a great piece of vinyl inside. To me, it just adds to the enjoyment of your record collecting experience or your listening experience. Anyway, thanks for sitting in. I hope we learned something. I hope you learned something. I did when I was going through all this. And it is interesting, and you can really nerd out on some of this stuff. Join me in the next episode when we will talk about handling, storage, cleaning, so on and so forth. Thanks so much. Keep on rocking.